the chaotic forces of nature. Dark forces watch from the northern lands. The sky darkens. The shadow rises. The earth shudders. We arrived to create a new life with Downey, with Partholone. We had created the first guest house, cleared the first land and allowed the cattle to graze. We had started to create a life here. But always we knew there was other things going on. This was before the steady period that you know of the Holocene, the time when the temperatures were just right, the carbon and the oxygen levels were just perfect due to the awakening of the green world. This is before that green world had awoken. This was before that things had settled. And it was the raw elemental powers, the disfigured giants, the huge forces of nature, the adamantine powers that we had to recognize. The first gods of the land, the indigenous gods of the land, the great giants. And at this time they were led by Kickle Clapperleg, and he looked down upon us. But I reflected, and I heard other stories, because there was a Shanachie, a storyteller older than I, that had witnessed the land for even longer than I had. His name was Fintan MacBookra. And for him, I went to and was told this story. And he told me that in the beginning, there's always been the land. The serpent in the depths of the fires of change, renewing herself in the heat of passion as the devouring goddess bubbling up from the terrifying waters of callous deeds. A spiraling, circling energy, imprinting herself on cold stone in the light of the moon. She is in the Barrow Mounds, the rising hills, and the darkest woods. She is the uneven path, the circle of stone, and the forgotten tombs. She knows of no heaven or earth, higher or lower, but has tasted the succulent fruit of honeyed bliss in islands created by women who know the secrets of healing and of entombed kings waiting. She is betwixt night and day, death and life. When you cross the bridge to meet her, fear can no longer exist. The cruel laughter and dark shadows of times before disappear into the abyss, and the soul is freed forever. She is Banbha, high up in the mountains at the time of the flood. She is Banbha, older than Noah. She is Banbha, first known by Fintan MacBookra. And this is where our story starts. Oh, Banbha, oh, Banbha, Banbha, oh, Banbha. Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, oh, Banbha, oh, Banbha. Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, oh Banbha, oh Banbha. Banbha, Banbha of mountain and sea, Banbha, Banbha of soil and plant, Banbha, Banbha of river and brook, Banbha, Banbha of meadow and wood, Banbha, Banbha primordial mother, oh Banbha, Banbha, Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, Banbha bow and braid, oh Banbha, Banbha. Banbha, Banbha of mountain and sea, Banbha, Banbha of soil and plant, Banbha, Banbha of river and brook, Banbha, Banbha of meadow and wood, Banbha, Banbha primordial mother, oh Banbha, Banbha, Banbha bow and beard, Banbha bow and beard, Banbha bow and beard, oh Banbha, oh Banbha, Banbha bow and beard, Banbha bow and beard, Banbha bow and beard, Banbha. Ireland was a desert. There was no life there. The rocks had formed. Gravity had pulled the heaviest elements together to form that iron core. And then the light elements had gathered together to form the crust. And then upon it was that substrate, was the soil beginning to form. The oxygen levels starting to be just correct for life to resume. And she stepped upon the land, and it blossomed. It blossomed like you cannot imagine. The beauty of all of the flowers erupting before us. The wonder of all of nature. And she sang to the plants and the trees, and she recognized all their qualities and all they were. Nettle and dock give true nutrition. Avens, alehoof, soothes our constitution. Plantain, self-heal, yarrow, herb robert, heal our wounds, make us whole. Chickweed, crosswort, cleavers, cowslip, ointment for our skin, relief from within. Agrimony, speedwell, willow herb, clover, clear our lungs, cough no longer. Dandelion and burdock purify our blood. Wood sage for our appetite, foxglove for our hearts, archangel for stress. It gives a good rest because herbs are our healers, plants are our friends. You may call them weeds, but they help us mend. You may call them weeds, but they help us mend. And so the plants erupted, and above them there was the wonderful pollinators fertilizing their seed and all of the life starting to happen. People talk about the old stories and the folklore, but I shall tell you now, there is nothing more fantastic, more mesmerizing, more astonishing than nature itself. The plants started a fraction of a millimetre in size. Now let us get our heads around this. The fact that something a fraction of a millimetre in size was going to change the course of the strength and the power of the adamantine raw elemental forces. For this tiny little cyanobacteria started to do something which was truly magical. It took what it needed from the sun. It uses the sun to not only create glucose and syrup by mixing it with water, it used it to cut the water and release the hydrogen and to take all that it needed to create carbon, to release carbon, to bring in carbon, as well as the oxygen levels as well. It created this perfect cycle, which meant that there was a perfect amount of oxygen and a perfect amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The plants made all of this available to us. And then their roots, as they got bigger and stronger, they needed to make a friend they had in the fungus. The fungus, to start with, was much taller than any of the plants. It was 8 meters high, huge sponge-like structures. And as they connected to the fungus broke down the rock. It used its enzymes and its power to create soil. And as then the plants started to eventually get onto the land, they created leaves that were able to maximize the photosynthesis, leaves that were able to enable them to live upon the land. And then their roots stretched down into the ground, and they lifted up the iron. They lifted up the iron out of the rivers, and they put it into the sea. And everything was in balance, was in harmony. They made sure that there weren't vast floods. They made sure that things were supported and looked after, and all was good and all was well. The plants did a duty to this world that you could never ever imagine or believe. The plants awakened. The green world awakened. And Banbha chanted and sang with all of her peoples. But of course, these were the first stirrings of life. And when life starts to stir, when we put a new action forth, other things happen too. And as it did so, the rains started to come. Now, of course, we need rain, the same way as we need carbon dioxide, but too much of either can cause much devastation. And when the rains came, they did not stop. The historical deluge, the deluge that is known in all mythology, came. And as it came down upon the land, it filled it, and it filled it. More and more and more and more water. And Banbha and her women were taken down under the waters. Some would say Banbha went down to Tirfohan, the land under the sea. And there she waited under the otherworld hazel by Conla's well, the purple hazel and the white cow, Bofinia, which would one day rise up and become the moon. But others would say she went up onto the highest mountain, and that top was never covered in water, and she waited for the next race of people to come. But either way, Banbha was the first woman. And when Banbha came with her people, the first sheep grazed upon the pastures. And the first Shanaki, Fintan Macbukra. And Fintan Macbukra stayed just in the sea for 1,000 years, maybe 2,000, as a salmon. And he remained there, imbibing all of the knowledge of the deep darkness, salty, ferocious seas. And there he witnessed and saw. He saw something extraordinary. He saw the great elemental powers rising, the elemental powers that come in the disfigured forms of the great giants. The first giant, the parthenogenetic mother, Daunu, the raw elemental power. And she could create without needing any help. She needed nothing to fertilize her eggs. She was the power of the earth itself, and she could create from her own womb whatever she wished. And then there was Terra. Terra, who was the lord of the animals himself. He knew the first interactions of ecology. He knew the compassion. He knew the wisdom of the natural world and the life forms that lived upon it now that the plants enabled them to breathe. For it took 1 billion years for the plants to create the right conditions. But then we come back to the seas rising, to Daunu, the parthenogenetic mother, creating, to Terra, the lord of the animals, creating the first giants. The first giants as Daunu, as Terra, as Net, as Balor, as Indek Mac Dadownum, as Elaha Mac Dauba, as Bresh Mac Elaha, as Kikol Clabalek, as Mork, as Conan, these huge giants. Now some you would say were disfigured. Some you would say had animal heads and human bodies and only one arm or one leg, and they were ferocious indeed. Balor of the evil eye can consume all of the world just by looking upon it. And yet there were giants who were beautiful. For we have the volcanoes, we have the tsunamis, we have the earthquakes, we have the hurricanes. All of this has been here before and is still here now. But then we have the rising and the setting of the sun. We have the beauty of the moon and the stars. We have the wonder of the the uncompromised landscapes of cliffs, of mountains, of rivers and streams, the chaotic forces that stand in the epochs of time, those that are once upon a time, those that stand in time which seems to stand still. As the sand stands still in Bruna Bonia at the winter solstice, these energies are on a time of their own. All of those wonderful mini beasts that fertilize the flowers can be gone in a year if we don't look after them. But these powers stand in eternity. 100 years, 1,000 years, even 1,000,000 years is nothing to them. The indigenous, raw, first gods and goddesses of this earth, unapologetic, and they settled up in the north. They settled up in the north, in Tory Island, and they built a tower so they could keep an eye on all what was happening and all that would happen. And Banbha was still here, the first woman. And as the waters started to settle and things started to change, it was my race, the race of Partholone, that moved onto Island, as I said, from the southwestern onto Kerry. And when we settled there, we knew these dark forces were coming for us. We knew also that there wasn't a lot we could do, but Downey was always hopeful. And Downey mustered an army together, and we fought Kickle Clapperleg. In fact, we kept them back. We stopped the giants taking over. But then nature, Cora, Danu, Marka, the great powers in the earth as Cora came forth, and disease was released. And when that disease was released, all of my people died. It was only me that was left, only myself, Tuan McCarroll, in the beginning of the chaotic forces of nature. But it is to be said that there were the other forces of the giants, and the sun would rise again, the sun in the form of Trifiliad Triocha, of Elaha Macdauba, and when they came forth, they shone like you could not believe. Elaha with his gold and yellow hair down to his own 2 shoulders. Elaha, who had a golden brooch upon his breast. His shirt had trimmings of gold. He wrapped himself in a mantle with golden thread. He carried 2 white silver spears, in them 2 smooth shafts of bronze, shining bright like fire under the silver. He was girded with a golden hilted sword with inlays of silver and studs of gold. He was glorious in every way, the king of the sea itself. And he would seek out Eru, the goddess of the land, the sovereignty of the land itself, and they would come together. And then there was Trifiliad Triocha, who stood tall and proud so the sun could be seen between his legs. His shoulders were as high as the largest, most tallest of all of the woodlands. And so there was balance and harmony coming out of that chaos. But that is another story for another time. Blessed.